Hi friends, I'm Chelsea and I'm here with my July reading wrap up. So I read 11 books in July, which is more than I've read in any month this year so far. So it was a really good reading month. I did not have any DNFs and I had a couple 5 stars and lots of books that I really enjoyed. So I'm excited to talk to you about them. And because I have so many books to talk about, I'm going to try to be concise and I'm going to try something a little different. So I saw a video of someone who did a wrap up and she just had everything in categories of pros and cons instead of just like going through a lot of detail. So I'm going to try that, just giving you my pros and cons of what I liked, what I didn't like, and some short plot summaries, and just try my best to keep it short. Okay, first up, I read Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, and I'll be referencing my reading journal as usual. This is the second book in the Part of Your World series, and Part of Your World is the first book. I had read that like 2 years ago, which I kind of wish I had reread it because I did forget some things about it, but for the most part I remembered it. So this is book 2, and this follows Brianna, who is a character in the first book, and Jacob, he's the love interest. So both Brianna and Jacob are doctors. Brianna is going through a lot. She is finalizing her divorce and her brother is needing a kidney transplant, and then also she's up for a promotion, but she's up against this really mean guy that she doesn't know, and she assumes that he is just going to be a big jerk. So it happens to be Jacob who shows up, and he's really sweet. He's kind of socially anxious. He actually does have anxiety. They start writing letters to each other at work and just become friends and get to know each other. So it goes on from there. It's a really cute, sweet romance, and I really enjoyed this one. I'm going to start with my pros. First of all, this was hilarious. I laughed out loud a bunch. There was a mental health focus, and like I said, a character with anxiety, and I thought that was portrayed really well, and I just appreciated how Abby Jimenez just focused on that and had some deeper issues going on. I really loved Jacob, like he's just the sweetest. I really enjoyed Benny's subplot. So Benny is her brother who needed the kidney transplant. I was really emotionally connected to his storyline. Just felt really emotionally connected in general to a lot of these characters. There was not a lot of spice, which could be good or bad depending on who you are. For me, I enjoyed that. Also, this was dual POV, which I really liked, and I did listen to this on audiobook and I really enjoyed the narrators. So my cons, the big thing that lowered my rating of this. So the first half I really enjoyed a lot, but once we got to the second half, there was a lot of miscommunication. And I'm not a big fan of that in books, and so that was really frustrating to me. There were just so many things that could have been avoided if they had just communicated and been open with each other. And Brianna started to really get on my nerves. She was just kind of clueless and did a lot of annoying, irritating things to me. I really do like her as a character, but I was just getting kind of frustrated with how little they were communicating. That was really my only major complaint, which it was a lot of the second half of the book, so that was not great for me. Otherwise, I did really enjoy this one, and I definitely recommend. I'm going to do a quote as I usually do and then move on. We're all a little broken, Brianna. We are a mosaic. We're made up of all those we've met and all the things we've been through. There are parts of us that are colorful and dark and jagged and beautiful, and I love every piece of you, even the ones you wish didn't exist. Okay, next up I read The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. This was a library book. This one was very interesting. So I've seen this compared to Sherlock Holmes because there's a major murder mystery element, but it's also a fantasy book, and so it combines two of my favorite genres, fantasy and murder mystery. It was a very unique book. So first I'll tell you a little bit about it. I'll try to encapsulate it. The book starts with a murder, and the person who was murdered is found with like a tree that's sprouting out of their body, basically. It's very gruesome. You're just like thrown into it, and the investigator, whose name is Dinius, I think is his full name, he is sent to investigate and kind of figure out what's going on. So he's working with the head investigator. I think her name is Anna, and she's the character who's compared to Sherlock Holmes. She's very eccentric, very awkward in some ways, and just really smart and like 10 steps ahead of everyone else. She's also very morally gray and just hilarious. I loved her. She was like my favorite part of the book, honestly. But basically they're investigating this murder and uncovering things that are not as they seem, things that that are going on under the surface, some conspiracies. And so at the same time, they're in this world that has leviathans, always kind of this constant threat of leviathans approaching during the wet season, and it's just very ominous. And so you kind of have that element of it as well, along with the murder mystery. And then also people can be altered to have certain skills. Like Din, for example, he's been altered to have a perfect memory. And so some people can have like super strength or super speed or, things like that. So that's the general plot. This is the first in a series and the first book I'd read by this author. So I'll start with my prose. This is very unique, very intriguing premise, setting, world, just everything about it was really unique, I thought. Very lush atmosphere. I liked the leviathans. They were really interesting. Just the ominous feeling you get. Very intricate mystery. I never knew what was happening. I was always just kind of guessing. Like I said, Anna, who's the Sherlock character, she was hilarious. I really loved her, and there were some really funny dialogue moments between her and Din. Really good writing, and I thought this was just a great setup for the series, so I'm definitely excited to read the next book. And so my cons here might have been more of a me problem, honestly, because this book took me quite a long time to get through. And I was expecting to just like fly through this and totally be like hooked and engrossed the whole time because I'd heard such good things about it. And I did really like it, but there were times where it was hard for me to pick it back up and I felt kind of bored and like it was moving slowly. It took a long time for me to get into it. It was weird. Like as soon as I picked it up and started reading, I was really interested and enjoying it, but then I would put it down and get distracted and then just move really slowly. So it might have just been me at the time. Here is a short little quote that made me laugh. So instead of committing robbery, I made tea. Next up, I read Edgedancer by Brandon Sanderson. I listened to this. It's a novella, and it falls between the second and the third book in the Stormlight Archives, I think. So it's recommended to read it between those two, which is what I did. This follows one character from the first two books that kind of showed up on the side. We didn't really get much of her in the first two books, but she gets her own book. So her name is Lift. She's like 11 or 12 maybe. She's a young girl. She has recently discovered her powers. The way that she gets her powers is by eating. And so she's always looking for food. She's on the run from this guy named Darkness. He is looking for other people like her who have recently discovered their powers. She's trying to not be caught by him. And she's basically just discovering who she is because she's a young girl. So it's very much a coming of age kind of story. This is a very quick, short read since it was a novella. So my prose, it was great to get back into Stormlight and just get a little more insight into the world and the story and different characters. It was just fun to get a little glimpse of that, but not read like a 50-hour book. There were some funny moments. I enjoyed seeing Lift grow and discover more of her powers, and like I said, kind of figure out what kind of person she's going to be. So the cons, a lot of people I've found after looking on the internet will agree that Lift is just quite annoying, and especially I feel like listening to it, I just got more and more annoyed as the book went on. She's always referring to her powers as being awesome or her awesomeness, and it just gets really repetitive hearing that over and over again. And again, with her needing food to get her powers back, she's always just looking for food, and so it kind of felt like the whole book was just her searching for more food and pancakes specifically, which made me really hungry. So I don't know if that's a pro or a con. I was kind of hesitant going into this because I wasn't sure if I wanted like 6 hours of just Lift. She's just not my favorite character, but still enjoyed being in this world, and I'm glad I read it in between these books so I'll have a little more understanding of what's going on in the plot. The quote is a quick one. I will remember those who have been forgotten. So next up, I am going to talk about two books together because they're the second and third book in a series. Hey, my cat is pulling on this tab. This is not playtime. I'm so sorry. The next two were books in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. My library hold came through for the second book, and then I had to immediately start the third book because of the cliffhanger that it ended on. So I read The Ballad of Never After and A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber, and I'll talk about The Ballad of Never After first. I can't really tell you the plot of these because it's the second and third book in a series, and these books move incredibly fast. There's a lot of things that happen and a lot of twists and turns, a lot of cliffhangers, so I literally can't even tell you what happened in this book. This does follow Evangeline, who is this very naive, optimistic, romantic kind of girl, and she believes that true love can be found. This is from the first book. Her true love decides to marry another. Basically, she goes in search of her true love, and a lot of things happen along the way. She meets a man or an immortal being, potentially. His name is Jax. It follows Evangeline and Jax for these next two books as well. So, like I said, these books are very fast-paced and quick, very engaging, just like fully immersive. I absolutely love Jax and Evangeline, their romance. I definitely got butterflies a lot in this one. Just like really enchanting and fun, entertaining books. Nothing too deep or complex, just a really fun time, really easy books to just knock out pretty quickly. There was just an insane jaw-dropping twist / cliffhanger at the end. I just immediately had to start the next book. Like, I could not wait any longer. I had to know. I really enjoyed the journey of this book. There were some really cozy moments, some really romantic moments. I really enjoyed it a lot. Really, the only cons that I have is that in general, I don't love Evangeline as a character. I don't dislike her. She's just kind of forgettable, honestly. She's pretty naive, not a lot of depth or substance. She kind of just goes along with whatever happens. And in general, the book is not super deep or complex or has a whole lot of substance. I mean, they're definitely YA. That could be good or bad. For me, I don't mind YA. And a quick quote here, "Let me pretend you're mine." So moving on to A Curse for True Love, the third book. Like I said, I had to start this immediately. I listened to the audiobook. Oh yeah, I should say I listened to the audiobook and I read the ebook for The Ballad of Never After. Kind of went back and forth, but I listened to the audiobook for A Curse for True Love. I enjoyed these audiobooks, so I would recommend doing that. I gotta say, I was pretty let down by the third book. I know a lot of people have that opinion, like they didn't love the third book. I know some people really did like it, but for me, it was definitely a letdown after the second book, which I will say is my favorite in the series. I liked how it ultimately ended, but the journey to get there was not my favorite. Didn't love it. I will tell you my pros though. I did like that Evangeline, she was more interesting as a character and not just going along with everything. Like, she was a little more defiant, little more stubborn and kind of trying to get her way and make things right. So I appreciated that. It was finally a happy ending and I did like how it ended. Definitely still like a fast-paced, quick, easy read. And you still kind of have that fairy tale feel, but the cons, let me tell you. So there's a character that I just hate so much, and he had a major POV throughout this book, which I was not happy about. Every time he had a chapter, I just kind of tuned out. I feel like I missed some things because I just didn't really care to hear from him, and it did feel a little repetitive because of some things that happened in the plot. And I will just say we had less Jax, which is sad because I feel like my favorite thing about the first two books was Jax and Evangeline, kind of the progression of how things went with them, their banter, their dynamic, their chemistry. There was a lot less of that in this book, which I really did not like. I just felt less invested in general. There were some other characters that got some spotlight too that I just didn't care about, honestly. I just wanted Evangeline and Jax. It's just not the direction I expected it to go in, so it's definitely my least favorite book in the series. I still recommend the series overall for sure, but there were some parts of this that were hard for me to get past. Okay, next up we finally have some physical books here. All of those were audiobooks or ebooks, which is weird, but the next string of books are physical. So next I read Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is for Ellen Made Book Club. I listened to this and I read it. I've been doing that a lot lately, which has been pretty enjoyable. This is a dystopian, post-apocalyptic sci-fi book, and it follows the main character, Lauren Olamina. She lives in California and it's set in 2024. It goes up until 2027, I think. She basically lives in this walled community with her father, who is a pastor, and then her friends and family, and they are all kind of protected from the world around them, which is just overtaken by climate change and economic crises and just social chaos, anarchy. Life is still going on. People are working and going to school and stuff, but things are not good. And then one day their community gets attacked and she is separated from her family and is forced to get out and survive on her own. So then the rest of the book is her meeting people along the way. At the same time, she's also basically coming up with a new religion because she doesn't really believe what her father believes, and she's writing in her journal and coming up with all these ideas that become this religion called Earthseed. Got a lot of stuff going on, and this was my first book by this author, and I'm really glad I finally read a book by her because I really enjoyed it and can't wait to read more. I'm planning to read the second book this month, actually. So here are my pros. I found it very thought-provoking, lots of profound moments and things that just kind of made me think, especially with this being such a similar world to what we live in. In some ways, they're a little worse off than we are, and then other ways, it's really eerily similar. With this book being written in 1993 or sometime in the 90s, it's just crazy to me how accurate her predictions were. It was very engaging, drew me in. It was pretty fast read for me. There were some found family elements that I really liked. I always love to see that in a book, and I thought her whole thing with like creating the new religion was interesting. It wasn't like the top thing that I liked. I really liked seeing all the survival stuff and just like the social climate and all that. And like I said, I'm really excited for the sequel. So yeah, I really just loved her writing, just kind of like this straightforward but profound way of writing. I really clicked with it, I guess. So my only cons were I was a little confused at the beginning. I was listening on audiobook, and I think I was just confused with like the Earthseed religion stuff versus like just other things in her life. It was just not all connecting, so I switched to reading it and listening at the same time, and that helped a lot. And then there was a relationship in this that honestly just kind of like creeped me out and was hard for me to move past. If you've read it, you probably know. And then this was very bleak and heavy, obviously, which I don't mind, but a lot of people might find it to be too much. So you just kind of have to go into it knowing that. I really enjoyed it, highly recommend. And here is a quote. "It took a plague to make some of the people realize that things could change. People have changed the climate of the world. Now they're waiting for the old days to come back." Next, I read Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and I loved it so much. This was a 5-star read, so another 5-star romance for me. I've gotten several of them this year, which I'm really happy about, and this is the third book in the Part of Your World series. This one is about Justin and Emma, and they meet online through like a Reddit thread. Justin posts how he has this curse, and basically every woman he dates breaks up with him and then goes on to meet their soulmate. And so Emma finds him, and she actually has the same thing. And so they kind of connect over that. They come up with this arrangement where they will date, and so when they break up, they'll both meet their soulmate. Seems like a good deal, and of course, they fall for each other along the way, and at the same time, Emma is dealing with some pretty heavy stuff with her mom. Her mom is just like terrible and toxic, a lot of childhood trauma. She and her best friend come to Minnesota to be with Justin. Her mom ends up being there, and they're dealing with that. And then Justin also, he assumes guardianship of his 3 younger siblings suddenly, basically being a single parent for a while. And so they have a lot of stuff going on. I loved this one so much. This was my favorite in the series. And I just gotta say, please read the series in order if you plan to read it. I know a lot of people want to read Just for the Summer first, but I highly recommend reading them in order. Trust me, it's better if you do it that way. Okay, so my pros. There were a lot of them. There's like one con. So here's all my pros. I felt all the emotions, laughed out loud, and full on cried several times, which if you know, I don't do that a lot. I love Justin so much. He's just truly wonderful. I also loved Emma, just their dynamic, like really honest but fun, and they also had really great chemistry. I loved the strong friendships that both of them had, and again, kind of the deeper topics that you deal with, but it was still a quick, pretty easy read. There were some good family themes here. I loved the slow burn romance. That's like one of my favorite things. Again, low spice, dual POV. I loved the non-romantic subplots. I loved the connections that you got from the other first 2 books, which is why I recommend reading them in order. I literally just loved everything about this. Really, the only con I could think of is sometimes watching Emma's response to her mom and her childhood trauma was a little frustrating at times, but I know it was kind of intentional because she's dealing with a lot of stuff. It was very real, but there were some times where I was just frustrated, and her mom is, like I said, truly terrible, so that was kind of hard to watch, but I think made it more impactful in the end. Highly recommend it, and I'm going to read you a quote. "Your empathy is beautiful, Emma. I hope you never lose that. I do hope that one day you get some boundaries, though. You cannot keep caring about her more than you care about yourself." Okay, next up, I read The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. This was for my in-person book club, and it's the second book in the Thursday Murder Club series. So we're following Elizabeth, Joyce, Ron, and Ibrahim. They are the Thursday Murder Club. They live in a retirement community, and they solve murders. So what's not to love about that? So this one starts with a whole whole different story from the first book, although we do have a lot of characters that return. So basically at the beginning of this, Elizabeth is approached by an old friend. He is desperate for her help. He's been accused of stealing diamonds. He's in trouble with the wrong people. There's some people who end up getting murdered, and then they're thrown into this murder mystery. They're trying to find the killer, and they're also trying to find the diamonds, because that's a little bonus. My main thing that I love about this series and this book, I just love these characters, especially Joyce and Ibrahim. Joyce's chapters are my favorites. She's just hilarious. It's really funny, really entertaining, really wholesome, a pretty easy read too, like short chapters. The second half kept me interested as far as like the plot and the mystery. The first half didn't hook me as much, I guess. The cons for me were there's too many POVs for me. Every chapter has a new POV. Sometimes it's like a character that barely seems to matter, which they do end up mattering, or it's like a new character that gets introduced. It's really hard for me to like feel invested when every chapter features a new person. It just jumps around so much. That's just not my favorite. Kind of took me out of it. And this is definitely like a cozy mystery, and to me it was almost like too cozy, a little too slow. Didn't care as much about the mystery in certain parts. I just really liked the characters, and I cared more about like their relationships and dynamics. So the mystery part wasn't as interesting or exciting to me. I enjoyed this. I'm not like obsessed with this series, but I think I do want to keep reading. And here's a little quote by Joyce, my favorite. "More women are murdering people these days," says Joyce. "If you ignore the context, it is a real sign of progress." Next up, I read A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Bachman, another one for Ellen Made Book Club. This one is a very popular book, and you probably read it or heard about it. There's also a movie with Tom Hanks, and I think a Swedish movie with it too, which I've seen the Tom Hanks movie, so I already was familiar with pretty much the whole plot and the story, which honestly I wish I had not watched the movie first because I already knew what was going to happen. Anyway, this one follows Uwe, who is a older man. He reads a lot older than he is. He's 59 in the book, and he kind of feels like he's 70 or 80. He's a curmudgeonly, is that right? Yeah, he's a curmudgeon. We'll just go with that. He's just kind of grumpy, actually very grumpy, and downright mean sometimes. He lives in this neighborhood, and he kind of just like keeps to himself and doesn't want to interact with anyone until one day some neighbors move in. It's a family with 2 young girls, and they hit his mailbox, and so he's forced to engage. From there, it kind of just goes through him opening up slowly over time, getting to know these neighbors and other people around him. There's a cat that shows up. First of all, I just love Frederick Bachman. So far, everything I've read by him has been 4 to 5 stars. But yeah, my pros for this one, very heartwarming story. I felt very connected to all the characters. I laughed a lot, got emotional, although not as emotional as I thought I would. I'll get to that later, but I did get emotional at certain points. Yeah, I just love his writing, the way he just really portrays the human experience. He just has a really unique way of communicating things. I feel like if you've read his writing, I'm sure you kind of know what I'm talking about. This one made me think about what's important in life, just spending time with the people you love. And I love the cat. It's always great. My cons for this one, like I said, I wish I hadn't seen the movie first, which that just is what it is. I feel like I would have been more emotionally impacted if I didn't know some of the major things that would happen. And I did get a little bored at times, like it felt a little slow and repetitive. Sometimes there were also some parts where it was really hard for me to empathize with Uwe because he was just very mean at times, and it was just hard for me to connect to that. He did grow on me over time. You really feel for him when you kind of learn what he's been through. Overall, really enjoyed this one. Highly recommend it, and I'm glad I finally read it. So here is a quote. "We fear it, yet most of us fear more than anything that it may take someone other than ourselves. For the greatest fear of death is always that it will pass us by and leave us there alone." Next, I listened to First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. This is a thriller. I'm just going to read the Goodreads thing because it's better than me trying to explain it. Evie Porter has everything a nice Southern girl could want. A perfect doting boyfriend, a house with a white picket fence and a garden, a fancy group of friends. The only catch, Evie Porter doesn't exist. The identity comes first. Evie Porter. Once she's given a name and a location by her mysterious boss, Mr. Smith, she learns everything there is to know about the town and the people in it. Blah, blah, blah. So basically, she's a con woman. You learn early on that she's not who she says she is. She has all these different identities of different jobs she's been on, but she's also trying to kind of figure out who her boss is and like why he's sending her to these people, just trying to get information about him as well. We get the jump between the present day and then all her past like identities. This was really interesting. This has been a very hyped up book. I think it was one of like Reese's book club picks, and so I was really excited to get to it. I really enjoyed the audiobook. I just thought it was a good time. So my pros, I went in pretty blind, and I'm glad I did because it was just a fun little ride. It definitely hooked me early on. Enjoyed the first half a lot, and I thought this was just kind of a fun, like unique premise. I haven't read a lot of books like this, so it's unique to me at least. And there were some good twists and turns, kept me guessing. I had some theories, and I was almost right on one, but not fully. It was really enjoyable. So my cons were that the time jumps into the past got a little repetitive and boring at times. And I also got a little confused with like all the names and different people. Like I was just trying to keep all of them straight since she had all these identities. And also this was not like a super fast-paced thriller. I'd say it's more like a slow burn, which I don't dislike, but sometimes you just want a thriller that's like on the edge of your seat, you know. But it was very engaging and I did want to keep listening. So that was a success. I couldn't find any quotes because I feel like thrillers don't have a lot of great quotes. So that's that. Okay, we are finishing strong with either my top favorite book of the month or at least tied with Just for the Summer. I'm cheating a little bit because I finished it on August 1st, but I wanted to include it in because it's going to be extra fresh, and I read the majority of it during July. So this is The Things We Cannot Say by Kelly Rimmer. This was actually from my TBR jar, and it was the prompt for a book I've been putting off, which I can't believe I put it off this long because it's like a new favorite book. I loved it so much. It kind of broke me a little bit. I haven't gotten this emotional at a book in a long time. So this one is a historical fiction book, and it takes place during 1942, like World War II, the Holocaust in Poland, and it follows Alina. She's a young girl when the book starts, and she's basically just hoping to marry her childhood love. Tomas is his name. He goes away, but she's still hoping to marry him when he comes back, and she's kind of blind to like all the things that are changing around her with the Nazis and the occupation, but her family starts to be personally affected by everything, and then from there there's just a lot of tragedy. And then we also actually get another perspective in the modern day, which was really cool. I haven't read a lot of historical fictions that jump between like present day and whatever time period they're in, which I thought was really good, and I think would be a good book to read if you don't read a lot of historical fiction. So the modern day timeline or perspective followed Alice, and she is a stay-at-home mom. She has 2 children. One of her children is on the autism spectrum, so she's struggling with that. And her husband, he doesn't really know how to interact with their son, so they have a lot of tension. And also her grandma has a stroke and she ends up in the hospital. All we know is that her grandma is Polish and she lived in Poland during the war, but they don't know anything about her family history. So we know there's like some connection between Alice's grandma and Alina, but we don't really know, and she doesn't even know. So there's kind of this mystery that you're uncovering throughout the book. And then, of course, their perspectives and their characters kind of converge, which I always really enjoy. I thought it was just really well done. So I have no cons. I'll tell you what my favorite things were about it. This took me on an emotional journey. I cried a bunch. I got really attached to all the characters. I loved how complex they were. They were all very layered and flawed people, but I felt really attached to them and just wanted the best for all of them. I loved both timelines and storylines. Like I said, I was really invested in both, and I thought the pacing was just really good. I did not want to put this down. Great writing, a little bit of a mystery, really great themes of like perseverance and resilience, but also like motherhood and just what it means to be a woman. There's also very complex family relationships and like the disability representation. Also, I love that this was based on the author's family. She had a bunch of info about that in the author's note. This was just a really powerful story to me. I feel like I'm going to be thinking about this one for a while. Highly recommend if you like historical fiction, or even if you don't, to check this one out. So here's a quote to leave you with. "This was what the occupation did to families. It shattered them into pieces without closure or explanation. Our oppression was loss without reason and pain without a purpose." So those were the 11 books I read in July. The only book on my TBR I didn't read was Anne of Avonlea by Ella Montgomery. This was the ugly cover prompt. I do still want to get to it at some point, but unfortunately I didn't get to it in July. So as always, let me know what you think about these books. If you read them or have any thoughts in general about them, let me know what you read in July, what your favorites were. Thank you for being here, for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!